Art with Mr. Posey. Nature drawings. Hello and welcome back. This is your last nature art project, and it's going to be a drawing very similar to what we did earlier in the week, where I'll be guiding you through drawing some nature things. Earlier in the week we did flowers, and today I want us to look at plants, trees, and mountains. For my art, I also used watercolor paint and crayons because of the cool way that they interact with each other. If you color things with the crayons first, go over it with watery watercolor paint, it won't stick to where the crayon is. Follow along with me to make a nature drawing. Today, instead of drawing just flowers, we're going to try to draw some plants, trees, and mountains also. Follow along with me. If you need a little more time on a step, make sure you pause the video so that you can catch up. We're going to start with the things that are in the front and move to the back. So first, I want some long plants. These are like long blades of grass or reeds that you would find in a swamp. Each one has two lines and they come to a point. That's my first layer. I can create a layer behind this layer also by putting these long pointy shapes in between the pointy shapes that I drew the first time. I may have a little one coming off from the side also. And now I have my tuft of grass or plants right in the front of my picture. On this side, I'm going to do a plant called a fern. A fern has a long stem that comes down the center, and then rows of long lemon-shaped leaves coming off both sides. As I go down my fern, my long lemon-shaped leaves get a little longer and a little bigger. And eventually I'll choose a spot for them to stop. I can have some coming off the tip also, and then I'll have them coming down the other side. If you have other plants in mind that you would like right in the front of your picture, you could pause the video and draw those now. I think because we learned it earlier in the week, I'll also do a happy little flower right here in the center. My petals, two lines for my stem, and my lemon-shaped leaves coming off of the side. So this is everything that's in front of our art. We call this the foreground. It's the stuff that's closest to us. I want a hill behind these things. So I'm going to start my hill on one side and go over, and it's going to go behind things when it hits them. You have to think really hard about where it would disappear behind something and where it would come out the other side. Now there's a hill behind our plants. Now I can do some things on the hill. Let's try drawing some trees. This is a leafy kind of tree, and this is part of the trunk. Now a trunk is at a little curved angle when it hits the ground. It doesn't just grow out straight. To make our branches, at the top of our trunk, we'll have our line come out to the sides, and then we'll put the letter V in the middle. That splits the one branch into two branches. Now I can do the same thing on this smaller branch. It goes out to the sides with a V in the middle to split that branch into two smaller branches. I can make my branches nice and straight or a little squiggly, and I can split them off as much as I'd like. Now that I have my branches, I'm going to do a big bumpy shape as the leaves of the tree. The bumpy shape comes right to the edge of where my branches ended, and then bumps up through the sky back to where it started. Pause the video if you need more time to draw your tree. Now I'm going to do another kind of tree, a pine tree. First I need some guidelines, so really lightly I'm going to draw a long diagonal line and another long diagonal line. It's like the capital letter A without the line through the middle. Now I'm going to do some zigzaggy lines that follow this triangle shape. See how they have the little points that come out from the sides? I'll do the same thing on the other side with these little curved points coming all the way down. A pine tree is also called an evergreen tree because their needles stay green throughout the winter. I have the bottom of my tree and then a little trunk underneath that's also a little curved, just like my leafy tree. Look at all the things we've drawn so far. And behind my trees I'll have my mountains, and they're going to go behind things, just like my hill. When I draw mountains, I like to have some big mountains, some little mountains, some double mountains. It looks more realistic if all of your mountains don't look exactly the same as each other. There's my nice mountain line behind my trees. We have so many layers. Finally, I'll put some puffy clouds in my sky. I like to have some clouds go right off my page. I might even have some clouds go behind things, since that's what we're practicing. See how that cloud looks like it goes right behind the tree? Maybe I'll have one more that goes right behind my leafy tree too. Now all of my main things are drawn, and I can go in and do some details. The first detail that I want to make is a texture inside the trunks of my trees. These are lots of little squiggly lines that make the tree trunk look rough, like wood. I can do some bushes, like a little bumpy shape that comes up from the top of my hill, a bush that comes on from the edge of the paper, and maybe even a bush hiding behind my tree and a little behind my fern. You can make as many bushes as you'd like. So I have my front stuff, my plants, my middle stuff, my hill and trees and bushes, and my back stuff, the mountains and sky. Another detail that I'll add is a little bird in the tree in a nest. If you'd like to pause the video and add any other details that your imagination can think of, now would be a good time to do it. Some bumpy lines in my trees, some pointy lines in my pine tree, just a little texture to let the viewer know what they're looking at. Maybe I'll do a little bit of texture in my leaves also. For these leaves, I'll just do a little bit of a line down the center. You could also do the little lines coming out like we did earlier this week too. Some snow on the top of my mountains might be a nice touch. And I think my drawing is finished. I'm going to color all of my main things in with crayon. When I say main things, I mean I'm going to color all of the plants with crayon, the trees and the bushes, and my clouds as well. The things that I am not coloring are the sky, the mountains, and the ground. I'll do those with paint later. For things that I want to be white, I'm going to color them with a white crayon. It might seem silly because it's white crayon on white paper, but I'm doing that so that when I use the watercolor paint later, it won't stick to the spots that I used white crayon, and those will stay white. I'm coloring everything that is not going to be painted. I'll do white in the snow on my mountains, so that when I use my watercolor paint later, those will stay white. If you're not sure what I mean, think about our flower painting earlier this week, or just wait a moment and I'll show you what I mean. I'm filling in my crayon nice and thick. If it's not thick, it won't hold the watercolor paint off of the paper. I'm going to thickly color in the clouds with my white crayon. I don't know if thickly is a word, but I just thought of it, and that's okay. I'm finishing coloring my clouds white, and then I'll be ready to start some watercolor paint. If you need more time to color your picture, go ahead and pause the video. My last bit of coloring is on my little bird, and I'm going to make it a little red and orange bird. A little red for the body, a little orange on the front, and a little brown for its bird nest. I would also color the top of the leafy tree before you paint, but when I made this video, I forgot to do that first. I'm going to use my very watery green paint. I'm just going to paint over all of the area at the bottom that is my green ground. Notice I'm not trying to paint around my flower or around my plants. I'm just painting right over them. Since my watercolor paint is watery, and I used my crayon nice and thick, the watercolor paint isn't going to want to stick to the paper where there's crayon. I can take a Kleenex, give it a little dab, and that paint comes right off of the crayon. I took away a little of my green, so I'll put a touch more in. So I have that nice green grass. And I'll use my Kleenex just to touch the flower and the leaves. Make sure all of that green paint is off of my crayon. Now I like to do mountains purple, but you could do mountains brown or blue. And once again, I'm not trying to paint around things. I'm going right over everything and then using my Kleenex to touch the crayon areas and pick up all that extra paint. Like I said, I thought it would be a good idea to color in this tree first before I paint my sky. That way, I won't have to paint around it. I can just paint over everything with blue and then touch it with a Kleenex. All right, now that tree is protected from my paint. I'll get my very watery light blue and I'll do some long brush strokes back and forth over everything in my sky, painting right over my tree, right over my clouds, right over some of the snow on the mountains. Make sure your watercolor paint isn't too thick. Use lots of water for this part. Once everything is filled in with blue, and I move it around just where I want it to be, I can take my Kleenex and touch everything that's not supposed to have blue paint on it, and that blue paint will come right off. Since watercolor paint is made of water and crayons made of wax, the wax keeps the paint off of the paper. That's my nature drawing. If you'd like to include different things in your nature drawing, feel free to use your own ideas. Thanks again for all of your awesome work. Come back next week for our last art projects for this school year.